Okay, to begin, our brain is an amazing supercomputer. So, according to the Northwestern Medicine, your brain power is completely and virtually unlimited. So, lots of people say that you only use like 10%, but you actually use your full 100% of your brain even when you're sleeping, and this is proven by scientists. So, if you take a piece of your brain the size of a grain of sand, it contains up to 100,000 neurons and up to 1 billion synapses are happening in that little piece of brain. So that just goes to show how powerful our brains are. And anyway, so the structure of your brain, to start off, it has 2 hemispheres and white and gray matter. So, and then you also have 6 major parts and 3 major arteries. A quote from Johns Hopkins University in the article Brain Anatomy and How the Brain Works: gray matter is primarily responsible for processing and interpreting information. White matter transmits that information to other parts of the nervous system. The 6 major parts of the brain are further explained later in the article. The frontal lobe is the largest part of the brain and involved in personality and characteristics. The parietal lobe is the middle part of the brain and helps a person identify objects, and the occipital lobe is located at the back of the head and is involved with vision. The temporal lobe is on the sides of the brain and involved with short-term memory, music, and speech. So temporal because your temples are right there. And then your cerebellum, or your little brain, is a fist-sized portion at the nape of your neck, or a little bit higher than the nape of your neck. And it is, the new studies explore its roles in thoughts, emotions, and social behavior, as well as possible involvement in addiction and schizophrenia. The brainstem connects the brain to the body and transmits messages from your body to your brain and vice versa. So ways to remember where like your anatomy is frontal and anterior means in the front, and posterior and anterior, posterior and dorsal mean in the back. And then 3 major arteries are the frontal cerebral artery, the middle cerebral artery, and the posterior cerebral artery. These 3 arteries stem from 1 major artery in your neck called the carotid artery. And then next I'd like to talk about is stress, mental health, and how it affects you. So usually the chemical associated with stress is cortisol. And a quote from his February 1st, 2022 article titled "The Stress Chemical Cortisol: Short and Long-Term Effects on the Body" by Ty Bailey states, "Cortisol is responsible for regulating a person's metabolism, blood sugar levels, and blood pressure. It also contributes to memory formation in individuals, and it assists in fetal development in pregnant women. Cortisol is also capable in reducing inflammation within the body, so the effects of high levels of cortisol for too long can be like premature aging of the brain, and other undesirable effects like depression and obesity. The triggers of the secretion of cortisol can be like too big of a workload, and it can be too big of a workload. And anyway, sleep, not enough sleep, and dehydration. Some of the most precious things that we have been told or said we keep locked down in our brains. How do we do this though? According to his November 3rd, 2017, "How Does the Brain Store Memory?" article by Powell says, "Memories are thought to arrive from the formation and modification of synapses and are stored as microscopic changes in the connecting points between neurons." Powell describes synapses as neurons and their connection. Basically, neurons are the main cells and foundation of the brain. So a neuron can basically be thought of simply as basically a ball and chain. Ball being the soma and the chain being the axon. As neurons kind of connect and communicate with each other, they transmit messages, and messages can come along the axon or the chain part, and then there's little accelerators along the axon that are called myelin sheath, and people with MS have deteriorating myelin sheaths, and so that's why they react slower, because information doesn't get as fast to their brains, or they can't register it as fast. Not always have we known so much about our brains. They're very complex and difficult to understand. According to the University of Queensland in an article titled Understanding the Brain, A Brief History, it said, in 335 BC, Aristotle thought of the brain as a radiator to keep the all-important heart cool and not overheating. In the 16th century, Belgian anatomist Andreas Vesalius created a highly developed map of the nervous system. In 1791, the first suggestion that electrical impulses were important in the nervous system, Italian Luigi Galvani showed that if applied, electricity could make muscles contract. In 1848, American railroad worker Phineas Gage had an iron rod strike the left side of his frontal lobe. It passed through and he survived, but aspects of his personality and characteristics did change, suggesting that specific brain regions were important for certain functions. In the early 1900s, anatomists were taking advantage of microscopes and new staining methods to explore the smallest parts of the brain, so this would be the neurons. In 1932, Sir Charles Sherrington and Edgar Adrian won the Nobel Prize for proposing the concept of synapses. In the 1960s, there was an explosion of science just because of, or not only because of the launching of the rocket, but a lot of those technologies actually help us today still. And we have learned so much. So in conclusion, now that you've learned the structure, history, how memory works, and the effects of cortisol and what it does to your body, it's been 2,357 years since we first thought of us having a brain, and I hope you keep learning more.